Hello folks, this is William Bailey from Bill's Historical West. And I find myself this Memorial Day weekend at Riverton, Wyoming, where I have come to attend a black powder shoot. And I wanted to take occasion to sit down with an old acquaintance of mine that I know through the American Mountain Men. His name is Kenneth, and he's spent a lot of time up here with this black powder club that puts on a really nice event. And we're gonna talk to him a little bit about the event and some other things. So enjoy Kenneth Hall. Hello, Ken.
Morning. Here we are.
Here we are. So Ken is the organizer, he's an officer in the local club here. If you could explain to us what the event is, how long it's been going on, and the community aspects of it.
Well, the Wind River Muzzleloaders has been a club here in Riverton for, if not 50 years, but maybe pretty damn close to 50 years. And we come in and we shoot our black powder rifles at different targets, paper targets mainly, for 25, 50, and 100-yard targets. And then we also have some primitive, like myself, targets that we shoot, and we kind of judge that. Whoever high scores, whoever ends up winning. We're right here on the big bend of the Wind River. Right here is where the 1830 and 1838 rendezvous was actually held. Up and down the river, anywhere from a mile and a half, 2 miles long. But right here at the big bend, what happens is the Wind River comes out of the Wind River range, and right here, right in behind me, it makes a big bend and heads straight due north until it goes through the Wind River Canyon, and that's where it turns into the Bighorn River. And then on downstream it goes. So
could you explain to us what the rendezvous is?
Well, the rendezvous is where, unlike this shoot, rendezvous is where the mountain men used to get together and trade their beaver pelts for trade items that they needed, whether it be knives, lead, powder, blankets, whatever the case might be. They would trade or sell their beaver pelts to the traders that came up from St. Louis.
So what time frame are we talking about?
Okay, so Lewis and Clark came up the river in the early 1800s. It wasn't until 1825 where they decided to bring the trade goods up from St. Louis to trade to the mountain men, the mountaineers that didn't have to go back down to St. Louis to trade their goods, that just met in one spot. Like in 30, they had the rendezvous here. In 29, they had another one upstream, about another 40 miles upstream. So every year they had a different location. There were some locations that they did 4, 5, 6, 7 rendezvous in the same location, kind of a, and not in the one spot. There again, mile and a half, 2 miles long, because of the horses that you had to use to pack your stuff in. The trade caravans usually amounted to 100 head of horses. 100 head of horses would take the grass and wipe it out in a hurry, so that's why they always moved it around.
So this black powder shooting event, I know a lot of us really delve into this period in history. It's very romantic. The beaver trapper was a person that many of us choose to emulate because of his toughness, his fortitude, his sense of adventure, the freedom involved with it. Would you say that even people that don't go as deep into it as you have would, by coming and shooting their black powder rifles, in some way embracing the romance of that period?
Back in the late 70s, when Charleston Heston and Brian Keith did The Mountain Man, that's kind of what got me started in the black powder movement. I bought my very first black powder muzzleloader back when I was still in high school. So 78, 79, I was still in high school. Bought my first black powder and started shooting just basically dirt bank. I didn't shoot in competition, but then I started finding the local clubs. There's one in Casper and one here in Riverton, and throughout everywhere, there's clubs that you can go to and shoot, learn more about your black powder rifles. The black powder rifles have been around, for hundreds of years, and they'll still around. There's still people building them, so it's just what I end up shooting. I don't shoot any other firearm except for muzzleloaders.
So your introduction to muzzleloaders is not unlike mine, but some people select it as a journey, a life pursuit. It's wonderful that way, as you can start as a very young person with guidance and to do these activities until you're very old. It's not uncommon. I saw in the shooting line up here, there were men over 80 still competing. So it's a wonderful activity. It's very community, a lot of camaraderie, all of that.
Absolutely.
Goes with it. But some of us go farther. There's an organization called the American Mountain Men, which really wants to embrace this historical period, the rendezvous period from 1825 to 1840. And could you tell us a little bit about that organization and its goals and how you were driven to become involved with it?
Like friends of mine that actually introduced me to the AMM from here in Riverton, they started a party here in Riverton with 4-person party, and that got me involved with it. What drove me to the AMM was the AMM, the Mountaineers of the 1800s were self-sufficient. And, a lot of them had Indian wives. They didn't have any white wives, they had Indian wives, which taught them the environment of the edibles and, medicinals that you could find. And I'm really heavy into the edibles because if the power would ever go out, I think the AMM guys would survive longer, because when we camp, we usually camp without no power, without any propane gas, anything like that. So we're adapt to survive, and that's what the AMM was. They started off as survivalists. So.
Yes, it very much is survival based, primitive survival, how to get along in the woods without modern conveniences or modern contraptions or equipment. It's certainly an awesome fallback to have in a modern world if things go south, as we'd say. You are currently holding an office on the board of directors with the American Mountain Men. Your brigade bourgeois, which AMM is divided into brigades by geographical boundaries within the United States. And so you have a lot of men under your guidance, and who you represent on the American Mountain Men's Grand Council. So that's kind of the government structure of the organization. There are many field requirements involved with gaining your full membership in the organization. Could you tell us what some of those things are?
Well, the number one requirement is that you have to have a set of hand-sewed, hand-cut your clothing. So all my shirts are all hand-sewed, hand-stitched, no sewing machines involved, because the sewing machines hadn't come along yet. The hand-stitching, and with Lewis and Clark, when Lewis and Clark came up the river, they were paying their seamstresses to sew a shirt $1.27. So, and when I'm making shirt, I can make 20 or 30 shirts in a year. So back then I would have been pretty rich. But the hand-sewed shirts, the hand-sewed, everything's got to be done right. Any modern gear, we throw it out. The second one is you have to camp 4 times. You have to camp 3 days in the 4 seasons: summer, winter, spring, and fall. So the winter camps are the hardest. I spent one winter camp here on the Big Bend that it was about 40 degrees below zero, and all we had was a lean-to. It wasn't a tent or a teepee or anything. All it was just a lean-to. And the mountaineers of the day back in the 1800s, they wouldn't have had the big wall tent. They wouldn't have had the big shelters. They would have just thrown up a shelter or no shelter at all. So another requirement is you have to spend 3 days in the wilderness by yourself with nothing but your gun, your shooting bag, and your knife. You can't take any food with you. You have to survive for 3 days. To go 3 days without food, it's relatively easy. We can all lose a little bit. In my 3 days, when I did my 3 days, I ate 1 cottontail in 3 days. So, yes, I was definitely starving. But back in the 1800s, a lot of the mountain men went days without eating, and then once they finally, took game, then they would just gorge themselves. So,
well, there are 20 requirements for Hiverano membership, which is the highest degree of membership in the American Mountain Men. Of the 20 requirements, which one do you think is the most difficult to complete?
Difficult. The hunting and taking of game from a primitive camp. Back in the 1800s, you hunted game all the time. Nowadays, you have seasons and requirements and licenses that you have to fulfill. Back then, you can trap year-round. Nowadays, with beaver, I cannot put a trap in the water until October the 1st. So when I go trapping, I don't wear any kind of rubber clothes because they don't, rubber hip waders because they didn't have them. So trapping a beaver or any animal as they would have done in the 1800s, that's a tough one. And that is one of the requirements. You have to be able to demonstrate. You don't have to do it because some states don't allow you to trap, but you have to be able to show the ability to set a steel trap, a deadfall, and a snare. Deadfalls and snares you can make, the steel drawn traps you have to purchase, but the deadfalls and the snares, you can take game with those. And it's not a requirement to actually trap something, but I think it should be, but some states won't allow you.
So upon completion of the 20 requirements, you become a Hiverano. Now you're eligible to hold brigade office or the national offices. So we have, fortunately, enough men willing to do that. AMM has about 600 members worldwide. There's a few outside of the U.S. and Europe. And of the 600, we tend to run an average of about 50 men who are Hiveranos. So not everyone that comes in the organization is driven hard enough to go after the extra requirements to get the high degree of membership. So with your skill set, I know you're an excellent trapper and hunter, and with your edibles and all this going on, with your skill set, you and I had discussed that you have applied for to be on the television show Alone. And I'm pretty excited about that, that a man from AMM might be considered to go out there and show the world what we know about actually surviving in a wilderness environment. This is a big part of us, and I think you're an excellent candidate for that. And we will well wish you and hope that you are selected.
Yeah, me too.
So we're going to move on up the river and
look for beaver sign.
And look for beaver sign. If you see the end of the log right there where Ken is sitting, that is a beaver chewed cottonwood.
from years gone by.
So we are in the environment.
Yep.
So thank you for your time. Hope you enjoyed this. Tune in for other videos on my channel. Please subscribe and give us your feedback. So for today, appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Bye.